Hello, and thank you for tuning in to From a Place of Self. This podcast is a place for me to vulnerably share my personal reflections and realizations with you in a way that hopefully gives you permission to do the same for yourself. I truly believe that the way to heal and transform the world around us is to first and foremost heal and transform the world within us. To support this endeavor, my wife and I have created the Conscious Earth Institute, where we offer training, education, and one-on-one work with people around the world using the model of internal family systems along with universal spiritual principles. You can find out more by visiting our website, consciousearthinstitute.com. If you'd like to be in touch with me personally, I'd love to hear from you and receive your thoughts, inputs, feedback, personal stories, or questions. You can write to me anytime at Dayal, D-A-Y-A-L, at consciousearthinstitute.com. And of course, it'd mean the world to me if you left a 5-star rating and or review of this podcast, as it really helps share this message with others who may need to hear it. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy today's episode of From a Place of Self. Hello, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Dal Grunga. This is From a Place of Self, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad you're tuning in. We're going to get started reading from this beautiful book, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, by Dr. Richard Schwartz, that talks about how we can apply the internal family systems model to our intimate relationships. And the idea of this podcast, From a Place of Self, means I get the opportunity to understand where I want to live my life from today. Where do I want to make decisions from today? Where do I want to express myself from today? Where do I want to love from today? And very often, automatically, by habit, from some time long ago, we've gotten used to living from the wounded places of ourselves, the insecure places of ourselves, the afraid parts of ourselves, the perfectionistic parts of ourselves that tell us that I need to accomplish a certain number of things in life in order to be worthy of love, belonging, or acceptance. I use my perfectionism. I use my A-type personality. I use my people-pleasing as a currency to belong and fit into the world. Or I live life from a place of my doubts and my fears and my critic that tells me that I'm not good enough. And I might be achieving so much in life, but if it's coming from that desperate place inside of me, that's just like this whip driver, it's never going to feel like enough. And I'm going to feel that tiredness, right? And ultimately, when life bumps up against somebody else's wounded, managerial, perfectionistic, tired part, that's where conflict comes in. That's where negative, mean-spirited, harsh, unproductive conflict comes in. And we find ourselves feeling disconnected. And so we can reconnect to ourselves and others when we are able to give space to heal those parts of ourselves and live life from a place of our core, authentic sense of being, our soul, our Atma, our spirit, our self with a capital S. So I'm going to start reading from this book from Richard Schwartz, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For. And I'm the kind of person that likes to read books like cover to cover. I don't know if that's kind of you. I'm not going to read to you the table of contents and the publishing date, so don't worry about that. But I did actually find some really beautiful sharings from Dick Schwartz in the acknowledgments, and I'm going to read just the beginning of that. He says, the words in this book are well earned. That in and of itself is a wealth of wisdom. Glennon Doyle, who I appreciate and have gleaned a lot of wisdom from herself, an influencer and author, she said once a long time ago in a video, I never take advice from somebody who hasn't been through the ringer once or twice, because that's where wisdom comes from. And it doesn't mean we have to go looking for pain, but it does mean that there is a wisdom of allowing yourself to go through what Richard Rohr calls the necessary suffering of life, so that we can come out the other side with the wisdom that it has to offer us. And so when we deny our pain, Richard Rohr so beautifully talks about this idea in his book, Falling Offward, about necessary and unnecessary suffering. And he says that pain, we often say that we'll hear that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. What do we mean by that? And he says that pain is some sort of sense of physical or mental or emotional discomfort. But suffering is a sense of injustice that I associate with that pain or discomfort. Some sense of injustice. It's not supposed to be this way. This resistance of reality of what is and insisting that it's supposed to be different. Now, sometimes there are ways in which we can make positive changes in the world, and we should do that, right? But sometimes there are things, despite our best efforts, that we can't control. And when I've attached my sense of happiness to outcomes being a certain way, I'm living a very tenuous, dangerous existence. That when my sense of happiness and well-being is attached to a certain set of outcomes, that's attached to certain people responding to me in a certain way, I'm living a very tenuous and dangerous existence. And naturally, there's a degree of suffering that comes along with that. And that suffering allows me to question the very foundation on which I've rested my life thus far. This is very apparent in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. For those unfamiliar, the Bhagavad Gita literally translates to divine song. It's a thousands of year old Sanskrit text that tells the story of Krishna and Arjuna being a warrior in the face of this massive fratricidal civil war. And it demonstrates the archetypes of righteousness and unrighteousness, of good versus evil. And Arjuna is on the side of this righteousness, having to face this battle against the forces of evil that are there on the other side, or the detrimental forces of his own family, his cousins and his relatives. And because Arjuna has a conscience, he, just before the brink of this battle, is seeing the armies that are assembled on both sides, and he recognizes, oh my God, there's people that I love on both sides of this battle. There's friends and brothers and uncles and teachers and grandsires and people that I know, people that I've lived with, people that I grew up with on both sides. How can I do this? And I always hearken back and think how beautiful it is that in many ways that itself relates to any conflict that we have in life. We're fighting with our own brothers and sisters, right? There is a spiritual connectedness that we all have, and we create these designations based on my physical shell of a body that I'm carrying, which very soon in the Bhagavad Gita, we learn that we put on new bodies just like we wear new and old clothes, right? I have a 40-year-old white American Italian Catholic body that I was given and I have grown up in. You may have a different body. And I may think that if I buy into the lie that that body is me, this is who I am, I make friends and enemies based off that distinction. When the reality is neither of us are our body. That this body is, mine's 40 years old, yours may be 20 years old or 60 years old or 80 years old or 72 years old or 27 years old. But I'm not that old. That's just how old my body is. Just like my car. I might have a 5-year-old car, a 10-year-old car, a brand new car, or my house. I may have built a brand new house, or I may be living in a landmarked 18th century New England historical place that is preserved for all time. And I grew up in Whittier, California, and my senior prom was at the Richard Nixon Whittier Library, because Whittier, California is the birthplace of former President Richard Nixon. And his childhood home is preserved there. You can go and see it like a museum. Some of you may like to go see it because you're fans of Richard Nixon, and some may think it should be burned to the ground. Whatever your political opinions, that's beside the point. Well, in many ways, maybe it is the point. But you may live in a home that has a certain age. 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. It's just the age of your house. Similarly, these bodies have an age, but it's not me. I'm eternal. I existed before this body, and I'm going to exist long beyond it. I tell people often, again, I'm from Southern California, not very far from Huntington Beach, California. Huntington Beach is one of the surf capitals of the world. Competitions and surfing. And there's a lot of boardwalks and surf shops. There's one surf shop, I don't remember the name, but it was founded in 1984. And it says, just passing through since 1984. And I was born in 1984. And I think that's me. I'm just passing through this life since 1984. And that's the truth for all of us. We're just passing through one small chapter, one small sliver in a much bigger existence. What's really important in that context, right? And so Arjuna is having this existential crisis. Oh my God, what am I doing? I'm fighting with people that I love, with people that are connected to me, with people that I know, with people that I share a bond with. And that's true for all of us. We just forget the connection that we have with people beyond the pettiness of the externalizations that I give and that I ascribe to myself and to others. And so he's having this breakdown. And it's in this crisis that he's able to open up. He hits his own rock bottom, that he's able to open up this beautiful spiritual dialogue, right, of life, to inquire questions about who am I? What's the meaning of my life? Why do I do anything? Why does this situation even exist? And so Richard Rohr talks about the idea of necessary suffering. Arjuna walks towards that suffering. He walks towards that pain, and he says, it's hard. There are a string of verses where he talks about my skin is burning, my mind is reeling, my hairs are standing on end, and I'm forgetting myself. And he's this in puddle of depression and anxiety and uncertainty. And he has the option of just walking away. And he says, I'm going to walk toward it. And he doesn't do it alone. He turns to his dear friend, Krishna. And he says, I need help. I want to use this as an opportunity to grow spiritually and connect more deeply. And that's why it's the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is sometimes referred to as Arjuna Vishadha Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's despair. Yoga, the word yoga literally just means connection. To yuk, it's where we get the word union from, to yuj, to unite, to bring together, right? And in this context, yoga in a spiritual context often refers to the connection of the soul and God. My sense of self connected with the greater sense of the source of all selves, which may be called God. The Bhagavad Gita will refer to as Krishna, Allah, Vishnu, Jehovah, a variety of different names, just like there are different names for the sun, right? But it's one sun that's shining in the sky. And so similarly, the source of all beings, when we connect to that, that's called yoga. When we are disconnected from that, that's forgetfulness, that's illusion. And the suffering of life is sometimes a doorway for me to acknowledge what's not working and what isn't going to work. Because sometimes I create stories about what's going to make me happy, about what I need in order to be fulfilled, what I need other people to do. I need somebody else to do this, that, or the other in order for me to be whole or complete. And when that house of cards starts to fall apart, we have the option of desperately trying to keep it all together or allowing it to come down so that I can actually start to see the real structure of my life, the real beautiful house that's there that I can build, that is waiting for me. Because love, happiness, joy, connection are real. They just don't exist in the mirage of the material quagmire if I can use that word, quagmire. They don't exist in the mirage of the material facade that many of that marketing agencies and corporations and social media and companies and even social circles and families tell us where to find it. So when Dick Schwartz, back to our book, says the words in this book are well earned, right? Mean that he's going to be sharing from his own life and experiences. He goes on and says, I've had relationships with many people that could be considered intimate, and I've learned from all of them. Some of my best teachers have been the clients who have allowed me to experiment with their internal and external families and who have challenged my parts. I'm grateful to all of them. My good friend Dunya Rico, who's a counselor and I'll call her a relational specialist. I don't know if I've ever coined that term to her before, if she's referred to herself as such. But if you're listening, Dunya, I consider you a what did I just say? Expert? Relational specialist. Who's really good at understanding relationships and offering relational advice, and especially in spiritual contexts where our relationships are the crucible. They are the place in which we are able to learn the most about ourselves and are able to pull out all the things that we normally like to hide from the world or even hide from ourselves. We get very good at hiding things from ourselves. And so this book, You're the One You've Been Waiting For, as well as Richard Schwartz's acknowledgement and thankfulness to even the people that seem to cause us pain. Because they are sometimes the ones. Sometimes we need, and that doesn't mean someone causes us pain, doesn't mean we just say, bring it on. No. We sometimes need boundaries. We sometimes need to extricate ourselves from dangerous situations. And sometimes we may need to cut people out of our life, but we don't do it from hatred or from bitterness, but we do it from a place of recognizing there's nothing more value here. Or maybe there wasn't anything of value here because it was just abusive. And that happens sometimes. But very often, and he goes on to say, I will just read this next paragraph, the acknowledgments here, because it drives home the point. He says, my first wife, Nancy, taught me a great deal about intimate partnerships and suffered while I was learning. My second wife, Jean, while having benefited from that learning, has also helped me to find and heal many more parts, making me realize that this intimacy thing is a lifelong process, and I'm so grateful to her for putting up with me. Which means that oftentimes when we get hurt in relationships, we like to blame it on the other person. You made me feel this way. You're so this, that, the other. But oftentimes what it is, it's a big mirror that's holding something up to something in me that I haven't dealt with yet, that I haven't looked at yet, that I've been too, for good reason, scared to uncover, or I don't even know how to go there. What does that even mean? Because we're unconscious of it a lot of the times. And so the invitation I have for you today is to allow your pain. I think Glennon Doyle uses this phrase, if I borrow from her. Our pain can be a traveling professor. Sometimes we think our pain is like a hot potato. I need to just get rid of it as soon as it comes into my hands. But my pain or my suffering, the necessary suffering of life, the unavoidable suffering of life that Richard Rohr talks about, can be like a traveling professor. And I don't want it to leave until it's taught me the things I need to know. And people in my life, if you think your intimate relationships are meant to make you happy, they're meant to complete you, they're meant to be your source of joy and love and fulfillment, which sometimes they are. I'm not painting a negative picture that relationships are meant to cause you pain. Your wife or your husband or your partner is your ball and chain that's meant to bring you pain and you should be grateful for that. No, relationships can be beautiful. They can be wonderful, but only when we release them from the expectation of thinking you're meant to fill the hole in my heart, which was dug some long time ago. Because there's a God-shaped hole in the heart, and there's a self-shaped hole in the heart that I'm meant to fill by bringing those wounded parts in relationship with my core sense of self. And that core sense of self is meant to be connected to my highest source of self, who some of us choose to call God, for those of us in 12-step programs. Or in the Gita, Arjuna turns to as Krishna, right? So I want to invite you today to take some time to set down the burden of blame and to bring those parts of you that need attention today into relationship with your highest self. And if that feels overwhelming or feels like too much, you can pray about it. You can meditate. You can just allow yourself to take some space and invite your higher power into the situation. And at least set the intention that you may not know how to right now. You may not know what it looks like or is going to look like, but you know that you want to be on a path of reconnection to your higher self, to your higher power, and you want to invite all of your parts into healing and harmony so that we can then venture out into our intimate relationships from a place of self without expecting other people to be that self for us. I'm sending you so much love. I'm so glad you're here on this journey with me. Thank you so much. Please reach out if you'd like to stay in touch. You can follow me on Instagram. I'd love it if you left a review or a 5-star rating on whenever you're listening. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave a review. It helps me a lot. And I'd love to just hear from you more than anything. So sending you lots of love. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.